So I want you to imagine for a second that human communication isn't just about the words we're speaking right now. Imagine it's actually this highly cinematic, multi-channel broadcast, and it's powered by this incredibly ancient biological legacy operating system. I mean, millions of years before humans ever uttered a single sentence, we already possessed a remarkably sophisticated communication network. And honestly, the most fascinating part, that same ancient system is running silently, right now, right beneath every single conversation you have.
So let me ask you, have you ever literally smelled fear? I know, it sounds totally made up, like a line out of a premium, high-stakes thriller movie, right? But today, we're gonna see how our everyday interactions are controlled by this ancient hardware that goes way, way beyond what we consciously hear or see. We are constantly, and I mean constantly, broadcasting and receiving hidden data. We're detecting threats, establishing trust, even finding mates, all without saying a single word. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1, the biological broadcast, the face.
So long before grammar was even a thing, the human face was our primary communication device. It was basically a living screen transmitting real-time data to anyone watching. And to really understand how highly specialized it is, just think about the number 43. That is how many muscles you have in your face right now. We actually possess more facial muscles than almost any other animal on the planet. And here's the kicker: most of those muscles, they didn't evolve for basic survival functions like chewing your food or breathing. Nope, they evolved specifically for expression. They were literally built to broadcast. And what's wild is that this broadcast is completely universal. Decades of research looking at everyone from isolated rural tribes in Papua New Guinea all the way to people walking the most densely populated modern streets of Tokyo has proven that 6 basic expressions are identical absolutely everywhere. We're talking fear, disgust, happiness, anger, sadness, and surprise. These aren't cultural behaviors that we just pick up as we grow. They're deep, hard-coded biological broadcasts, and every single human is born already knowing how to transmit and receive them. Plus, this ancient hardware is incredibly fast. You might have heard of psychologist Paul Ekman. He discovered what we call micro-expressions. These are involuntary, lightning-fast flickers of emotion that flash across our faces in less than a fifth of a second. It's basically an emotional leak. So even if you are trying with every ounce of your willpower to keep a straight poker face, evolution is going to force the truth out anyway. For our ancestors, being able to silently broadcast danger that quickly was the ultimate survival advantage. All right, moving right along. Part 2, hands built the road, the gestural origin. You know, the leading theory right now is that language actually didn't start in our mouths at all. It started in our hands. If you look at our primate cousins, wild chimpanzees and gorillas use over 80 distinct deliberate gestures, and they'll actually wait for eye contact to make sure their message lands. But human infants, they take this a massive step further. At around 9 months old, long before they can say a word, babies uniquely point at things just to share attention with you. And biologically, this makes total sense. Broca's area, the language center in our brain, sits right next to the motor planning systems for our hands and mouth. So the wiring for speech literally grew right out of the wiring for gesture. Which brings us to part 3, the rhythms and calls, the voice. So if the hands built the road, the mouth eventually figured out how to drive on it, using these ancient vocalizations. Take the biological algorithm of vervet monkeys, for example. They don't just scream wildly when they get scared. They use functionally referential calls. It's like a code. An eagle alarm specifically means hide in the bushes. A snake call means scan the ground. And a leopard call means climb the trees. This isn't just some random emotional outburst. This is concrete, real-world data being transmitted through a primeval vocal code. But you know, the voice wasn't just for sounding alarms. It was absolutely crucial for unity. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar came up with this brilliant theory called grooming at a distance. Basically, for primates, physical grooming builds social bonds, right? But you can only do that one-on-one. Early humans figured out how to use rhythm, things like chanting, drumming, playing these crazy 40,000-year-old bone flutes, to synchronize their movements as a massive group. And doing that physically raised their oxytocin levels and pain thresholds. It replaced physical grooming and bonded dozens or even hundreds of people all at once. Music was literally the ultimate social glue. And the physical hardware required to upgrade those early rhythms? It was developing incredibly fast. Now, voice boxes don't fossilize, obviously, but the hyoid bone in the throat does. And it turns out, Neanderthals possessed a hyoid bone that was nearly identical to ours today. That means the physical capacity for complex vocalizations was already sitting right there in their throats. When you combine that with their symbolic behaviors, like wearing pigments and ornaments or burying their dead,
it becomes super clear that they lived in a rich social world that absolutely required advanced communication.
Let's shift gears a bit. Part 4. Trusting the body, posture, and touch.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how our whole body acts as a broadcast system. Proxemics, which is basically how we use physical space to show dominance or submission, is deeply consistent across every culture. But what happens when our systems contradict each other? Imagine someone looks at you and says, "I'm fine," but their arms are tightly crossed and their voice is completely dead and flat. Studies show that when words and body language don't match up, humans universally trust the ancient nonverbal signal every single time. We just inherently know that spoken language is super easy to manipulate, but our ancient bodily hardware, that is incredibly hard to fake. Okay, moving to part 5, the invisible channel, chemical signals. So beyond what we can actually see or hear, there is this totally hidden channel operating entirely below our conscious radar. Remember that question I asked at the very beginning of this explainer about smelling fear? Yeah, it's 100% scientifically accurate. Humans are remarkably sensitive to chemo signals. We can literally smell the fear and stress in another person's sweat, and it actually triggers physiological changes in our own bodies. We can even detect certain diseases. In these famous sweaty t-shirt studies, humans consistently preferred the scent of people who had totally different immune system profiles from their own. We literally use this ancient chemical channel to make evolutionary genetic decisions on mate selection without even realizing it. Finally, let's bring it all together. Part 6, language as an upgrade, the mind. So how did we actually bridge the gap from primal calls to the modern language we're using right now? Well, we kind of have to look at language as the final software upgrade. Around 1.76 million years ago, early humans started crafting the Acheulean hand axe. And making this tool wasn't easy. It required hierarchical planning. You had to strike the rock in an exact, specific sequence of physical movements to get it right. That sequential cognition, it perfectly mirrors the neurological syntax you need to eventually construct a sentence. So by the time Homo sapiens showed up around 300,000 years ago, that cognitive bridge was fully built and ready to go. But wait, even before words were flowing freely, our advanced brains were already accumulating massive amounts of culture through completely physical means. Early humans taught each other using something called over-imitation. This is super unique to humans. Our children will copy exactly how a task is done, including completely unnecessary silly steps, just because they assume the precise form must carry some deeper meaning. When you combine that over-imitation with physical scaffolding, which is teaching someone a craft through direct physical guidance and pointing, you end up with a species that can pass down incredible amounts of cultural knowledge without speaking a single sentence. And all of this leads us to one absolute vital realization. Our ancient communication system was never just a rough draft for speech. Actually, scratch the idea of a rough draft entirely. It was, and still is, a highly sophisticated foundation that allowed our ancestors to survive against completely incredible odds. Language was simply the final software layered on top of it, giving us the power to combine signals into infinite meanings. But it never ever replaced that legacy hardware humming away underneath. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. The next time you find yourself deep in conversation, take a second and pay attention to what isn't being said. Ask yourself, is your every shrug, your every fleeting look, or even your silence actually a reach back to a language that is millions of years old? The truth is, you are constantly broadcasting on a primeval network that ensured human survival long, long before we ever had a name for it. Thanks again for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.